Okay, thank you all for coming today. My name is Justin Tucker. We are focusing on the digital toolbox and how to essentially take the district provided resources and build awareness of what those are and move move from awareness towards usage of those resources. Um, why a digital toolbox? Well, this is what I would say is a system's response to an uneven adoption of district provided instructional tools. When we look at the resources that we have versus the resources that teachers use, sometimes there is an uneven adoption of those. And, it begs the question, why? Um, I would make the case that there are barriers to usage, and I'm actually going to come back to that colorful slide for a second and use this one. Um, Awareness does not mean that people know how to access it. Accessing something does not mean that people know how to use it. Also, they, in order to use it, do they understand the purpose of the resource? Just knowing that it exists is one thing. Knowing how to get there is another thing. I could know that about a lot of tools and never use those tools. What we want to get to is the use of the tool. Um, I've actually highlighted this understanding purpose part here because that's what really unlocks the the usage of a tool is understanding what the purpose is behind the tool. So the case I'm going to make for you all today is when we talk about this digital toolbox, when we talk about the design of this digital toolbox, we want to lead with the function. We don't want to lead with the tools. We're not trying to design a toolbox that lays out that's that groups things by tools. We want to group things by their function. That'll make a little more sense in a minute, I hope. And we're going to get through a few of the why slides and some of the thought behind this before we get into actual design of the toolbox. So this slide here, um, there was a I was doing my research for my dissertation and I came across a guy named Everett Rogers, and his work completely changed really how I think about so many things, but it became part of the conceptual framework for my dissertation. It was one of the three legs that, um, and PLCs were another heavy influence in my dissertation work and research. And so what Rogers talks about is he's a really interesting guy. He was a graduate student at University of Iowa or maybe Iowa State, one of the two. And he was doing grad research on why certain farmers did not adopt innovative farming practices. And, he found whatever reasons for that, but he went on to hit the rest of his career went to a similar um, question of why do people not adopt certain practices, right? Well, the title of this book, how do those innovative things not get diffused throughout society? Or how do they get diffused throughout society? And so this chart, you'll see, um, if you ever Google Everett Rogers, you're going to see this chart. This is one of the main charts that come from his work, and it shows these different groups of people. And as we move from left to right, from green to red, these are the people on the left are the ones that are you don't really have to do anything. They're going to figure it out, right? Your innovators may know about it before you do. Um, what separates each group is a set of barriers, and that's what we're hopefully going to make the case for this digital toolbox is overcoming some of these barriers. But I'll dig a little deeper into the chart itself. So your early adopters are those that they're prone to want to explore these things. They just need to kind of they need to have access to them. They need to be aware that they're available, and they're going to dig into kind of understanding the purpose and start using them on their own. If we add those early adopters with the innovators, we get 16%, which is roughly 1 in 6 people in our population. Now, this is just statistically speaking by a man that made his life's work out of this. So, this is on average. Um, but so, what about the other 5 out of 6, right? Or what are the other 5 out of 6? What about those people? Well, that's where the toolbox would be a concept that would help overcome some of those barriers as to why are ed tech tools potentially not being used or adopted as heavily as they could be. That's that that critical mass, that early majority group is the group that if you have a targeted marketing, targeted support, targeted modeling, um, some of the ideas that we'll discuss today, then you can gain that critical mass. And if you look numerically, if those early majority, that group comes on board through a well-developed plan or a plan to make them aware, to provide them access, to let them understand the purpose, then now you've shifted from 1 in 6 people to 1 in 2 people, and now you've built that critical mass, and you have those networks now more developed in the peer-to-peer, within different PLCs, within different departments, within different campuses. You're going to have people that have adopted that, and so now it's in a way that the train the trainer concept, where you have built this critical mass, and you are moving in that direction. So now continued support, continued conversations, continued referencing of these resources move into the late majority, and then again, ideally 100% of the people that a resource was purchased for now have adopted it and are using it. And we could take this chart and we can look at it for really it's not all the resources. It's really per resource, right? So you have different groups that are going to use different resources, but you have certain groups that are going to not use those resources. So it's all relative, but the key concept here is providing the support that's needed. And I feel like if this toolbox is something that would help overcome some of those barriers to increase adoption and usage. Why does this matter? For teachers, they're potentially using resources that in ways that maybe that's not really the ideal use, or maybe they're using a resource that they went out and purchased and the district has already provided that for them. Maybe they don't use anything because they're just kind of overloaded with the choices and they're not sure of the use of it. And so they're just holding on to processes that they're comfortable with. Campuses, are there common conversations happening between teams in a department, between departments, just on how certain instructional or ed tech tools are being used? That to me would be an ideal situation where you had a science teacher speaking with an English teacher on how they use a resource, and that not only helps that collaborative support, but it, what we'll talk about with parents and students, maybe that kind of streamlines some of what they're having to do, because they're seeing a consistent platform within that school, and they're not having to learn different platforms or for different teachers. So why does it matter to district leadership? It can help support what the analytics are that you're receiving on tool usage. Um, we have a we have customer success managers. We have admin dashboards that we can look at usage of, and is that investment, is that taxpayer dollar being spent appropriately? Are teachers or campuses off buying their own, or are they just not being used at all? To me, um, I happen to be on the school board in Galveston ISD, and to me, this is in that line of work. For me, that's something really important that we are using the funds, and we're using because those are precious and scarce funds, and we're using those funds and getting the most out of every dollar that we're spending. So we want to not be purchasing things that aren't used, but if we're purchasing things that need to be used, we want to make sure that the people that are using them because they were purchased for a reason, right? And then that could help align, areas of support that would be needed to increase the usage. So it matters to really all these groups, right? All these stakeholder groups. Um, some things that would signal um, a lack of access, a lack of use, a need for this toolbox. We see tools overlapping, same tool, same function, different tools, right? Versus aligning that, right? Somewhere some money's probably being spent that doesn't need to be spent on tool overlap. Functional overload. Again, do we have more tools than we need that serve a certain purpose? Are teachers out or campuses out purchasing or departments out purchasing their own tools that do the same thing that they already have access to? What are our utilization rates? PD fatigue. Are we constantly training on the same thing? Are we training on different things that do the same thing? And are there fragmented practices happening on campuses? So I'll ask you to kind of play along with me here. I love each of these resources. I've been exposed to all except Bamboozle. Not that I've been bamboozled, I just have yet to experience that one. It might be newer. I might just not have heard of it. But the next two slides actually really kind of hopefully make the point of the intuitive nature of these titles and how it can lead to some issues that that I know I've seen, as far as people purchasing something that they already have access to, right? Are they using something that they already have access to something else, right? So when I look at these titles, I don't see gamified, interactive assessment options that I can provide my students with and pull some data from that to form my next decisions, right? So it's likely that if I did see Blooket in my SSO, that I could very well turn around, pass that up because whatever reason, and then I'm using Kahoot. Now, if I want to have a common instructional conversation within my department or within my campus or within my team or wherever, I may not know that, oh, hey, you're using Book, I'm using Kahoot. Maybe we can align our efforts here and use the same thing. A little more of the same here. Just the cognitive friction, titled it that way, with a little help from ChatGPT, but also kind of in line with the intuitive nature of these titles, right? Which do I choose from? I hop in my single sign-on portal and I may see all of these, except I wouldn't see Schoology and Canvas, and I wouldn't see ClassLink because I'd be in ClassLink unless I was in Clever. However, the point is, do I know what this resource does simply by looking at its title? Do I know that some of these resources offer some of the same things that the other one offers? So, the point that we're making today in our toolbox is we're wanting to design a toolbox in a way that helps increase adoption within our organization. We're wanting to overcome some of these barriers that we see these early people. We see 1 in 6 people using it. but how do we make sure that the other people are getting to it and utilizing it, and thus the toolbox. So, without belaboring the point anymore, this is our overview of what the toolbox looks like. We start from a single set of branches and we progress into more specific areas, and those areas are ultimately where we find where, what do they say, where the rubber meets the road, where we find out how to do whatever we're trying to do. What tools exist that serve that function? So we lead with the function, not the tool. We end up at the tool, but we start out with the function. So I will go through each of these to talk about each of them a bit. But our initial branch of the digital toolbox, well, a little more of the same. The functions of the page, right? When a user initially gets there, they're saying, what kind of work am I trying to do? Am I trying to find assessment, student support, communication, instructional tools, student-facing tools? These are what I put together. All of this is up to you. No one's saying that any of this is written in stone. I'm just trying to generate and start a conversation, or have a conversation and generate some ideas that hopefully will resonate with you. But once they click into communication, for example, how can I now narrow my search once I'm inside the communication page, right? So I've selected the initial page and taken that branch into the second page. Now that I'm there, I've narrowed it down to essentially the final narrow down. So maybe it's essential functions, maybe it's feedback and support that I'm looking to communicate, right? Again, we're leading with the function, we're leading with the task, we're leading with the operation, not with tool. We've yet to get to the tool. And then we get down to essential functions, and let's say that's our choice, right? Oh, we're looking to maybe something in that list under essential function is where the user said, yep, that's where I need to go. So they arrive at essential function, and now they're looking at what specifically am I trying to accomplish. Okay, so a little more of just an overview of these different pages and these starting from the initial branches and drilling on down. We're grouping by function in the digital toolbox first page. Again, you may see that there are less of these that you need, more of these that you need. Totally up to you. But this is what I went with. Just for purposes of this presentation, this is kind of how I think it would be best laid out. The front page, what it is, what it is not. It is a self-explanatory map that is simplistic in nature, that gives that user kind of confidence, doesn't overwhelm them, and they're moving into that area. Okay, yes, I'm here. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm selecting communication. I'm moving into communication because I know that's what I'm trying to do. Okay. It is not something that is, this dumping ground of resources. It is clean. It is approachable. It is something, again, that we want to build confidence in the user to say, yes, I know how to move into the next step, right? It is not all the things. It's not a training module. Those things can exist, but not on the front page. We don't want it to be too busy. Page 2. I know I touched on this already, but this would be everything that we offer under communication. So similar to the first page where we have these large branches, once we're in communication, we've now grouped, okay, what kind of different umbrella topics do we have under communication? I came up with these. You may come up with something different. Essential functions, operational, feedback and support. All these are ways to communicate. All these are functions that a teacher might be exploring. Okay. And then once you select that, you arrive at your functions page. Now, this is where I kind of vacillated a little bit. Essential functions, this third page, essentially, the tools can be referenced underneath the specific tasks that someone would want to do, right? We could at this point list these tools, or I kind of have this optional fourth page idea where the mass communication, the orange tab would be its own page, right? Or the blue tab would be its own page, to where there's a little more room on that page to get more explicit. And I'll talk about that a little bit now. There is a web design principle. And if I hopped all the way back up to the one where we can see all of these, there's a web design principle that says if you select a link and you are taken to a page, you can guarantee that 100% of the people that arrived at that page see what appears on the screen. Guaranteed. The minute that you have something that they have to scroll towards, that percentage drops from 100%, which means that it opens the door for someone to potentially not see a resource. So you may say, well, this is, a lot of clicks that they have to go through here. True. And I will encourage bookmarking. I know I've got that somewhere in here. I put a little banner that said bookmarking ... Because, I wouldn't think that someone every single time, if they found something they want to refer back to, they shouldn't have to start at the beginning to click to get to it. Like, once they get to it, bookmark it, make a folder. That's a digital skill that our adults and students should be, familiar with it. But the point I'm making is the design of this should consider brevity over a lot of things, because we don't want to overwhelm the user. We want this thing to be really have the opportunity to grow over time and branch further. So starting simple and expanding into other branches and other resources is something to keep in mind. Okay, so I was down here on the fourth page when I kind of got onto that, and I just wanted to hop back and show you those views. But essentially what we've gone through here is, there's my bookmarking. Yeah, all that and that. Essentially what I wanted to go through was the different views of I wanted to go through those views of the pages based on the web design principle. So y'all, if we stopped right now, I think we'd have really hit on everything that is the design part of the toolbox, or at least the layout. Some considerations that I thought would be helpful just to group here, all on one slide. Where does it go? Access and placement. Do I password protect it? I would say don't password protect it, at least like the first few steps. You may have some things underneath, buried or layered into it, that need to be password protected. Maybe you've done some learning walks. Maybe you've had some testimonials. These different digital resources that need to be password protected, sure. But early on, you don't want that to be a barrier to access. And where does it go? I would say, for one, where do you want to build it at? Do you want to build it in your LMS? Do you want to build it on a website? Do you want to build it in, I don't know really what else. You could get creative and essentially design a PowerPoint or a Google slide for it. But all that being said, I think that it needs to be housed and live. That initial link to get to the toolbox should be somewhere already common to your stakeholders. Visibility and marketing. Launching it does not mean adoption, right? Just because it's made and put out there doesn't mean that people are like, oh, yep, got it all, good. It takes a village, and that has to be some kind of marketing plan. It has to be consistent in different conversations. It has to be present. That could be embedded in PD. onboarding of new hires, just different conversations, planning conversations, meetings, faculty meetings, department meetings, PLC meetings. Um, and that takes the next column, that takes that modeling and that support from admin in different areas, campus admin, CNI admin, technology department admin. They need to understand HR admin, right? For onboarding, they need to understand that this is how we're directing our people towards learning about the tools that we are offering, um, which helps to promote a shared language, and it has to be seen as support, not as a mandate. The fourth column, starting small. This could be a very extensive project that could take years to refine and make it just the way you want it. But I would say, um, as the last point on the start small column says, don't rush, but don't wait. Right? Get it moving, get it started, and find a good visual of an under construction sign and use it. Right? Things can grow, and you would want this to grow. You would want to have feedback loops. You would want to have processes for revision of this. So it should never be done, right? But it should be well built out at a certain point if you're going to use it. And the final column is just, in maybe finding support, aligning with other frameworks, right? MTSS toolkits, other resources that people may be looking for. I believe a lot in digitizing learning walks, and even digital learning walks, right? Through screen recordings and testimonials from teachers on how they're using different resources. I think those are important things that could be layered in here. Things that support and complement instruction, scaffolding, just other resources that are being created on it within your organization to support instruction. This could help complement that. Moving on, there's this area of staying current, just as a something that has a place here. I feel important that company resources, those companies have teams of people that are developing how-tos and various support resources that are, we don't want to try to match the scope of them. We don't want to try to compete with Microsoft on what they use, or Google on the different how-to resources, or the LMS in my last 3 districts has been Canvas, right? So we don't want to try to replace that. They have teams for that. So what do? We link to those resources, right? Whenever possible. Now, we may have nuanced needs in our organization, right, on how we use that. Sure. That's where linking to a live internal document might be the ideal situation there, right? So that we're thinking of, when we change things, do we have to go back and change things in the toolbox, or is that link live to whatever resources we're providing? Do we have a periodic review? This doesn't have to be all the time. It could be just annually. It could be summer work. It could be ongoing. It could just be as things arise. It could be quarterly. It could be for whatever fits the scope of how you put it together. If you have a committee that works on this, if you have a single person that works on this, all those things are different sliding scales that equate to what your review will look like. But the review should exist in order to stay current. Part of that staying current and review process could be feedback loops or processes. Are we having informal conversations with people? Do we have a form? I know that surveys can have kind of a negative connotation and whatnot. So maybe that's more qualitative than quantitative in how we're using it. Maybe there's a way to track how many people select resources too. So, but that's getting a little beyond anything that I'd be prepared to talk about, because just throwing some ideas out there. And then, of course, the final thing on this list is new products. Definitely, if a new product was purchased by the district, that would be an ideal time to update and the toolbox, and it would also be an ideal time to push the toolbox concept through conversations with teachers about resources that help them navigate that new platform. The impact. I had a slide up earlier with the why behind these different stakeholder groups, but I'd like to kind of close out with the impact that it could have on these groups. For teachers, just being able to choose the right tool with less friction, right? Building that confidence in knowing that there are resources out there for them. Understanding the purpose of those tools and time, right? Knowing that I have a place to go that is crafted within our district that will point me towards a resource that would solve this need that I have. And if it's not there, that feeds back into that feedback loop, feeds back to the feedback. But it does. For campuses, that common language and shared practice, building that cross-departmentally to just enhance instruction, going back to how that can impact parents and students. If there's a parent that has a single student in the district, let's just go with secondary. That's been my background. That parent could have a student in 8 courses. And that's potentially 8 different teachers' styles that parent has to help support their child in. 8 different styles that child has to learn. There's a certain level of cognitive load that goes onto just navigating the platform that child has to go through just to get to the information. So the more consistent processes we have, the more consistency we have in some of our platforms, in some of our functions, the easier it's going to be on our students to learn and the parents to support those students. From a district leadership standpoint, we can have an increased visibility of what those campus investments, who's using them, who's not using them. Where can we provide professional learning and support to those that aren't? Why aren't they using them? Are they subpar? Do we need to consider getting something else? Is this something that's not being used? These are all questions that, if we know that we're increasing access, we're increasing awareness, we're increasing the understanding of the purpose, now we can better have those conversations. And then, some other things of reducing the duplication of shadow purchasing. The last thing we want people doing is spending money on things that they already have access to. That gets us to the end. I did want to, open the floor for any questions, any thoughts that anyone had, but that essentially covers everything. I can go back to anything that anybody might be interested in. This presentation, I did put the link to this Google slide in the portal through TCEA, so it should be on your app. Okay, thank you for coming today, and I'll be here for the next 20 minutes.